we go in, after speaking about Ishmael, we will go into um, the life of Yitzhak. We saw last week where he got married, and Eleazar was the matchmaker. We learned about the various steps in a Hebraic marriage, and we're going to pick up now with the married couple and how Yah is dealing with them. So let's get started. And because this is one document, let me get to where we left off. As you can see, it's one document. And this is where we left off last week, Ishmael and his children. So we pick up this week with the next generation of the covenanted ones. Yitzhak and Rebekah are childless in marriage for the first 20 years. Yitzhak's prayer for Rebekah was heard because Rebekah had asked Yitzhak to pray for her. She remembered or had heard the story that Sarah gave birth to Yitzhak at 90. And it was because Abram was promised, and Yitzhak is the son of promise. So she encouraged Yitzhak to pray for the opening of her womb so that the blessings that Yah said that he would send upon Abram and his seed might be established in him. Yitzhak, being a praying man, did just that, and Yahweh answered the prayer. He blessed them with the fruit of the womb. Now, Rebekah birthed a set of twins. We know from, I think we mentioned last week that about the twins in the womb because Yaakov and Esau were introduced at the time also. Now, prophetically, from the womb, we would recall that these two personalities clashed from conception. Rebekah, upon asking Yah concerning her pregnancy, Yah informed her two nations distinct from each other were fighting in a womb, and the older would serve the younger. And mentioned here, it's the beginning of a struggle that began in 1700 before Common Era BCE and continued even to the first century Common Era, or the 21st century Common Era. That is the time that we're living in now. So we keep this in mind, the beginning of continuous warfare. And here we are, part 5 now, the history of the Hebrew people, part 5, and we see Yaakov and Esau, two nations. And yes, that's more closely to resembling how they looked. And you can see both of them have same features, but different complexions. One is more melanated than the other, and one is of a reddish hue, and another is of a chocolate hue. And this is what would be called or considered red, not necessarily albino, but you'd find that he's called red because his body and his hair are auburn. Now, they represent the birth of the second generation. This is found in Bereshit chapter 25, and we're looking at verses 24 through 27. The time to give birth came, and Rebekah birthed two boys, who, as Yahweh told her, would become two nations. The struggle that began in the womb continued even during labor and delivery, as the younger of the twin grabbed his brother's heel, as if to prevent him from being born first. Now, that's a sign of great intelligence. This was indeed an oath, a sign, something to watch and consider. And yeah, we have images of how they would have grown up. You'd notice that Esau, his beard is auburn, reddish, and his close to match his skin. This same type you'd find among Africans, or well, more Africans than any than Asians. But it's the reddish hair with the reddish skin, very much like the color of the red heifer. Okay. And Yaakov, of course, as would have been the complexion of Yitzhak and the other Israelites at that time. Not only that, but also the surrounding area. And these were the people of Ham. So definitely they would have been of the darker hue, heavily melanated. Now, birth. One is called the supplanter, and the other, the red one. Yaakov was rightly given the name which means supplanter, which completely defines his character at birth. He attempted to supplant his brother as firstborn by grabbing Esau's heel. Now, Esau, who was also called Edom or red, because he was born with a reddish auburn hue. And like I said, like the red heifer, if you've seen pictures of the red heifer, that is what they call red. Now, there are some group of people that are about causing a division, saying that Esau is the white man, and I'm using the terms. Esau is the white man, but what you would see is that Esau being red did not mean that he was white. So to come to that conclusion is reaching very, very far to establish a racial statement. Both of them are of the same father and mother, just different color, hue of melanin, different colors. Now, this occurrence you can see around you today. And we have them here in the Bahamas. I'm pretty sure you have them. Canada, St. Kitts, Grenada, all around. You find people with African people or African descent, or what is called African descent, with the reddish hair, the auburn colored hair. And normally they carry nicknames like Reds. I don't know if anybody has ever seen a picture of Malcolm X, the, what should we call him? Muslim or freedom fighter? Well, anyway.
Both.
Okay. His name was called Reds for the same reason. His hair was auburn, and his skin was very similar, had a very similar color to his hair. So even his beard came out that auburn color. So his nickname was Reds. And that seemed to be the name that sticks to persons with that complexion. Now let's look at the character and calling of Yitzhak's sons. Scripture describes both of them. Esau was described as being a man of the hunt and of the field. This means that he was what is called a rugged outdoorsman, as unrefined. Also, being in the field indicated a bit of nomadicism in him, which you'll see played out in his generations after him. He was always on the move. Yaakov, on the other hand, was described as a complete man dwelling in tents. This denotes that Yaakov was more refined. He was learned and balanced. Dwelling in tents, should have been a space there, indicates that he was more of a sedentary type. He stayed one place. And with that background, I would like to throw this in, that civilization on the whole and development began when man became sedentary and was not moving all around. Once they were stationed in a place and they began to build city-states, then you would find that technology was developed and employed. Existing technology was built upon because everybody was working in the same vicinity. So anytime where you hear the word civilization, know that this means that these people were sedentary. They lived in that area, they developed that area, and they developed a high culture in that area. So This is, I say all of that to keep in mind, a nomad moving from place to place is actually moving for his next meal. And you'd find that people who lived in warm climates were more sedentary than persons who lived in cold climates that actually moved around basically following their foods. And I'm not going back to caveman because I don't believe that there's a period of caveman. Yeah, developed civilization that came forth that man was already at a level, scripture says. So with that, we look at that backdrop to sedentary or nomadic people compared with sedentary people. Esau being nomadic and Yaakov being sedentary, can understand why he would have had time to become refined and learn and balance. Now, the gift of Yahweh, Bereshit 25, 29 to 34 is being covered here. These verses define the turning point of the order of custom, expectations, and desires. Custom, until this time, Esau being the firstborn, had as custom a right. He was set to receive the right of inheritance of the firstborn, which would have included the covenant between Yahweh and their grandfather Abraham. This birthright was a greater and higher value than any birthright outside of it. That means even though every firstborn that came into the world would have received an inheritance and a birthright, according to custom in most civilizations, the birthright that is being passed down here includes an everlasting covenant between Yahweh and Abram's seed. Abram now deceased, so it's upon his seed. And there is one person or one selection of persons that are chosen to carry this covenant. From the time of Abram, it's been one person. The time of Yitzhak, one person. Now it's time for this covenant to move on to the next generation. But as custom has it, it should have gone to the firstborn. As in the case with Abram, Ishmael was Abram's firstborn, but that right was specifically given to Yitzhak, who was the son of Sarah, being her firstborn, giving some legitimacy, but not the customary legitimacy that the firstborn should have. It should have been Ishmael. But before Ishmael even came on the scene, Yahweh had already promised Abram that he would have seed, and then more specifically through Sarah. And that is where the covenant will lie. Yahweh spoke this to him. So now we have a very precious gift directly from Yahweh being passed from generation to generation, a gift that no other firstborn can lay claim to, even though there's great importance to the firstborn. The firstborns are referred to as the openers of the gate. They split the matrix of the womb. In addition to that, they're also the spiritual gatekeepers in their generation, or should be. So responsibility comes with it also. Yahweh says that the firstborn belongs to him and gives us the right to redeem. So that's one thing. Redeeming the birthright also redeems the possession of the spiritual gate. As was said, this birthright was of a greater and higher value than any birthright outside of it. As Yahweh made covenant with Abram and his seed only, this Abrahamic birthright was superior to any other birthright that would ever be delivered to the seed of Adam. So nothing else can compare to it. Now, we come to something that is very, very significant here, because it will alter what should have been the natural course of historical events. Esau, at this time, the possessor of the most precious birthright in human history, came into the family compound from the hunt one day because, yes, Everybody was living in tents, but they were living in one specific confined area close to each other. So let's go to the compound. He came into the compound extremely tired. He was doing what he normally does, hunting. Don't know if he caught anything, but he came in extremely tired and famished. Though at home in the compound with his father, mother, and household servants, those making his support group, he chose instant physical gratification over all things. His desire to be immediately satisfied superseded respect for the sacred, even though aware of the eternal significance of the sacred gift. His actions was indicative of his lack of appreciation and value, and was direct reflection of his attitude to Yahweh. He used his sacred birthright to purchase a simple meal. Forgive the spelling. When he could have actually gotten food from his mother or have his father's servants prepare a meal for him, because he had choices. But he used his most valuable possession to purchase from his brother a bowl of lentil stew. Could somebody please find for me a Malachi, chapter 1, verse 2 through 3, please. And somebody else, Romans or Romans 9:13. Both are saying the same thing. We were saying this because we want to see how the consistent continuation of Scripture is. The history that we are studying now is consistent throughout all of Scripture and is still used to teach Yah's will and desire. So does somebody have Malachi 1, 2 through 3? Anyone? Yes, please read.
It says, I have loved you, said Yahweh, but you ask, in what way have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother? Declares Yahweh, and I love Jacob, but I have hated Esau, and have laid waste his mountains and his inheritance for the dragons of the wilderness.
Praise Yah. And Romim, a letter by Rav Shaul, known as the Apostle Paul, he wrote this to the Romans to explain a very similar situation. Somebody has Romim or Romans 9:13. Anyone?
I have it.
Yes, please read.
Romans 9:13. Okay. As it has been written, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated.
Yes. Direct quotation. And Shaul there is talking about selection. But let's look at why Yahweh would make such a statement. Who is man to despise the Most High? Can the clay say to the potter, I don't like how you make me, or what you have given me is of no value? I prefer something else. It is very similar to the offering or the mindset of Cain and Abel in the beginning. The mindset of appreciation, the mindset of respect was demonstrated by Abel, where Cain had a nonchalant attitude toward that which was sacred, that which pertained to Yahweh. So we learned something very important here, that it is we who make the choices. And because Yahweh has given us the ability to choose, He lets us choose, especially if we have information and knowledge concerning our choice, and we choose to make the wrong choice. This actually cost Esau dearly, and he did regret it. But he wanted instant satisfaction, instant gratification, and that's the mindset of the 21st century. Something that we should be warned about. Continuing, Esau used his sacred birthright to purchase a simple meal. Like I said, when he could have gotten food from his mother or have his father's servants prepared it for him. And though despicable on his part, Jacob sold food to his brother instead of saving his life by feeding him. And though he did that, he showed greater respect in desiring by coveting righteousness, coveting that which is precious. Now, the cost placed on the stew was the eternal birthright. That's how much the soup cost. And this birthright was the cause of the struggle from the womb. So it would appear that Jacob knew how to choose correctly from the womb because he desired the right of the firstborn from the womb. And though it was a despicable act because he should have fed his brother, saved his life, it was a consented purchase. It isn't like Esau did not know the value of the birthright. And it's not that he couldn't ask for food elsewhere. Hey, keep your lentil soup, I will go to the next tent. No. Without caring. He consented. So in this, even though it was despicable what Jacob did, taking advantage of a situation, yet it showed to a great extent the heart of Esau and not looking at his other choices and taking one of those and keeping his birthright. So Yahweh said, you don't need to be carrying this, because as the firstborn and being the gate opener, he would set the pace spiritually for the generations that follow. Now, Jacob lives out his name. The supplanter supplants. And this story will be found recovering now, Bereshit chapter 27, 1 through 41. Is that a question? Yeah? Okay. Now, having obtained a birthright through a legitimate business transaction, that's what it was. Jacob coveted more. He wanted the blessing that should accompany the birthright also. Now, aided by his mother Rebekah, Jacob deceived his father by pretending and lying to be his firstborn brother. This lying and deception was to establish a theft. So we grew up hearing the words that a lie is a thief and a thief is a murderer. And you can see the progression. And it's a saying that I'm pretty sure that everybody on the platform has heard before, but you can see where that it's nothing new in human history. Lying precedes theft, and in most cases, entire cases, murder follows it, especially if the thief is being caught or is extremely desperate. Now, in this, though his desire for the sacred is admirable, his means of obtaining it was very, very wrong. And he was encouraged to do so by his mother. His mother was very clever. After having lied to his father, you'd notice that I'm not going into great details into these stories because I'm pretty sure all of us are familiar with it. But to bring out the important points of each of certain experiences that plays into the development of our history is what is trying to be pulled out here. So we come now to Bereshit chapter 28, 1 through 5. Now, recognizing that her hunter's son, Esau, was furious about the deception and had planned, after the death of his father, Yitzhak, to kill Yaakov. Rebekah came up with a brilliant cover. She never stopped working for for the son she loved, because Yitzhak favored Esau because he liked to eat of the game. But Rebekah admired Yaakov and kept him close. So she was protecting a baby boy. Utilizing both she and Yitzhak's disgust over the Canaanite wife that Esau had taken, she played on it to move Yitzhak to legitimately send Yaakov to her brother Laban in Padan Aram. Instead of Yaakov trying to run away on his own and causing confusion, here he is being sent by his father on a mission to find a wife, not in the land of Canaan and not in the vicinity of Esau, who wants to kill him. So this clever transaction with Rebekah provided the reprieve to safeguard Jacob's life. He, now the legitimate carrier of the everlasting covenant, he has the birthright and he has the blessing. So he is the firstborn. Now, here is where an interesting occurrence takes place. Esau is still, in his own way, looking to please his father most of all, because he was his father's favorite. So, because he admired a Canaanite woman, and both Yitzhak and Rebekah was displeased with it, he took on a second wife, and he married his first cousin, Basemath, the daughter of Ishmael. You remember her from last week's study when giving the list of Ishmael's descendants. He had 12 sons and one daughter. That daughter is Basemath. So Esau married Basemath and created a union of Esau and Ishmael that would create what we know today as the nation of Edom, the Edomites. That's who the Edomites are. They are descendants of Esau in combination with Ishmael. So you still have two of Abram's seed, but outside the covenant. And this nation would carry the animosity between Yaakov and Esau forward from conception to the 21st century. Could you imagine that? A constant struggle. And this struggle is both physical and spiritual, that is carried forward from the 17th century before Common Era, which was some 3,900 years ago, to today. And this is our study portion for today, because next week we will be going into Jacob's move to travel toward Padan Aram and his life in Padan Aram. And this is when everything really begins to unfold. So with that, I ask, are there any questions, comments, or discussion?
Only one thing had me thinking about the fact that if they did have servants, why would he have asked his brother to give him some of his soup or his lentils? Why didn't he, or his whatever he was cooking, venison? Why didn't he ask from the help that they had? They hired help.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. He had choices, but he chose. He said in his mind that regardless of what, I want that lentil soup above everything else. I don't want anybody else to fix it. I want what Yaakov have, and I will give whatever I have to get it. So that's a mindset.
What I'm thinking is that it had been prepared by the help, but maybe Yaakov had it in front of him as his table setting, and then Esau came in and saw him with his food, and then he just whatever, but he showed a lack of appreciation for his birthright, you
Yes,
know?
yes.
Yeah.
In this culture and custom, it's a small thing for the man to be preparing the meal for the house.
Yeah.
And with Yaakov, that was something that he would have learned to do, even though they had servants. Those servants were busy taking care of a whole lot of other things too. If they were asked to cook, then they would have to cook. Okay?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay, Sekan Eliyahu.
Yes, Toda. Interesting study.
Yes.
But just a quick response
Right.
to that first question. The text says that Jacob cooked the food. It
Right.
didn't say anything about helpers doing the cooking. Jacob cooked it. And so when Esau came, that is what he meant. So I wouldn't argue that he would have had choices of asking other people, because the text specifically says that he could. But I want to draw attention to something here. Well, two things. We understand that Jacob's character was determined even while he was in the womb. And so it would seem that as he grew up, he was a schemer, and he would do whatever he could to trick Esau. But the text tells us why. He was a complete man. He was learned. He was smart. Whereas Esau, maybe all he knew about was hunting. And so there was a level of ignorance on his part about other things. So he was motivated more by nature or by material things, whereas Jacob was able to see further than that. He was a thinker. And I also note that Jacob had a lot of help. The help from his mother was not accidental, because his mother knew, since she was told that the younger will rule the older. But here is what I find interesting with these two people. Both of them, Jacob and his mother, made the same mistake that Abraham and Sarah made, in the sense that they tried to do for Yahweh what he had already said he would do. You see, so that when he said he would give Abraham a seed through Sarah, and they colluded to use the servant to get Ishmael. Now look at what is happening here. Rebecca, we call her Rebecca, but now her name is Rivka. The correct name. She knew, and she did all in her power to get Yaakov to get to that point. And notice what he does. He takes advantage of Esau, because, as you quite rightly said, he could have shared the food with him, but that was not his nature. And his nature was to go into what would seem to be an invalid transaction. Kohen,
Duress.
why would I suggest that the transaction was invalid? Let me tell you why. Because Jacob actually tried to purchase what was already his. Yahweh had promised it, and his mother knew. And then in Esau's case, he tried to sell something that didn't belong to him. Yes, he was the firstborn, but Yahweh had already chosen who the actual birthright would belong to. You see, so even though he was the first to break the womb, he was not eligible for the birthright. But probably at that point in time, he did not know. But Jacob must have had an idea. And he figured the way to get it is through this deceptive means. And you know, that is how a lot of people operate. Even today, when you look at dynamics among families, among co-workers, well, especially among families, in terms of who believes what the parents have belongs to them, you see a lot of things happening among families, sometimes even as far as murder, because, you know, one individual feels that he or she has a right to what the parents would believe in as their inheritance or maybe their birthright, not in the same sense of the use of the term birthright in modern times as we are using it in our study tonight. But you get the point I'm making, right,
Yes,
Brian?
yes, I understand.
So I see that coming out. That scheming was almost like trying to help Yahweh rather than allowing him to work it out in his own time.
Yes, I do agree. Except that until that agreement was made between Jacob and Esau to exchange the birthright for the soup, the birthright officially belonged to Esau as firstborn, according to custom. Yahweh, knowing the end from the beginning from the end, would have known the decision that Esau would have made. And from then, know and understand that this is not the one, this would not be the one because he will not choose it. Whereas Jacob's name describes who he is. He is supplanter. So, as is in Hebraic culture, a person's name normally defined their character. And we have in this instance where the name explicitly defines his character. And that's why he needed a name change, as you'll see that he got later on. But it is correct that they tried to help Yahweh because Yaakov being close to Rebekah definitely would have known what she was told, and that would have encouraged. And with that, him being a schemer and a supplanter, already his nature, he would have looked for opportunity, and he did receive opportunity, and he acted on that opportunity. And again, even though Yaakov is described as a complete man, a learned man, there is a level of cunning that goes into hunting. There are skills that Esau would have been very much aware of. It's called street smarts, which in this case should have played the greater part if employed, or if Esau desired to employ it, but he did not. It showed that he just didn't care. He want that particular food. You're falling down saying that if you don't eat, you're going to die. And you're saying that I want this when there are other avenues of getting food. Because, like I said, they're all living in the same vicinity. Yes, Jacob might have been the first one that he stumbled upon, but he did not have to stop. They all go far to look for an alternative. His mindset was, like he said, what use is this birthright to me when I'm dead? Now, him being hungry could not have put him in the exaggerated place of death or near death. He was just hungry, famished. He just needed to put something in his mouth to give him the calories for the energy. Okay, I see Zakan, you have a hand up?
Yes, yes. As you mentioned that, the thought comes to mind. What good is this birthright to me when I am dead? I am not sure that when he made that pronouncement, he was thinking of immediate death, meaning I'm going to die if I don't get this food today. I think he was just thinking of the fact that I'm going to die someday, and this does not mean anything to me. Now, what could have initiated that mindset? I guess it's because he was a different person from Yitzhak. Sorry, from Yaakov, in the sense that he yearned for material things. He yearned for the natural. And so as far as he was concerned, everything in this life would end in death. Whereas Yaakov understood the spiritual implication of where he was and what he would get. You see, I believe he may have been told about Yahweh's promise to his grandfather Abraham. And he probably would have been advised by his mother that he may be the one to carry on the blessing or the covenant. So he was looking ahead, whereas Esau was simply looking at the present. And again, how many people do that? How many people say, oh, when I'm dead, I'm done. Or let me just enjoy my life now and because I'm going to die one day and that's it, without thinking that there is a life after death. Just a thought.
Yes, and that is a good thought, and I'm trying to read it in that context to see if I get the same thing. But that is an alternative view, because in the context they're talking about him dying because he is famished. You would want to think that it's talking about the immediate situation, but definitely it could be that he's saying exactly as you said. I'm going to die anyway, so what's use? But then that would give the impression, why do anything if you're going to die? Why possess anything if you're going to die? You still have that in that, what's the use? I'm going to die anyway. But to discard the most valuable thing like that is to make light of the gift that Yah had given, not just to him, but to the family line. He didn't want to, it didn't seem like he was interested in having the responsibility to keeping the covenant alive. So thanks for that, Zakan. Anybody else? Don't you find it interesting? Everybody? What we're learning in these interactions is we're learning how the Hebrew culture was established. There are things that are occurring in the life of each of the patriarchs that actually set a standard that continues, that turns into custom, tradition, and eventually into the culture that we're looking to examine. Let me just stop sharing this PowerPoint. Okay, there we go. So we are now moving from we have moved from Abram. We are moving from Yitzhak, and we're looking now at the second generation from Abram. It's also good to note that this is the second generation from Abram because of the promise that Yah made to Abram on the day that he cut the covenant with Abram, and that that in the fourth generation, he says that told Abram basically that his descendants would be enslaved for 400 years, but in the fourth generation. And when reading that, you wonder when did the generation start? But as we will see as we continue in the history, the generation is identified so that we can actually see that the generations would have began with Yitzhak. So we have Yitzhak as the first generation. That would be that prophecy. And then the second generation is Jacob and Esau, Yaakov and Esau. Yes, Al-Dakari.
Yes, I like that.
Mhm.
The passing on of the baton
Yes.
from Abraham to Yitzhak, because Abraham is just a man, and his life would come to an end, but the promise has to go on.
Yes.
But do you realize that that promise didn't come easy? Do you
No.
notice something about the father, the son, and their wives? Abraham's wife was barren. The problem was not Abraham.
Mhm.
It is Sarah who was barren. How do we know? Because he had a son by Hagar, and he had 6 other sons by Keturah, his
Mhm.
next wife. So
Yeah.
it was Sarah who was barren, to the extent that they laughed when the promise was given. How
Mhm.
is this possible? And it is for that reason why they went and planned to help Yahweh through Hagar. But now we come to Yitzhak. And I see something very interesting, because he did something that Abraham did not do. Abraham did not intercede for Sarah to have a child. He laughed at the thought that she would have a child.
Yeah, Sheila.
Yeah, sorry, she laughed, but he didn't really do anything to help her situation. What he did was accepted the plan, the alternative plan. But here now in Yitzhak's case, look at what he does. He goes to Yahweh, he pleads, he prays. Maybe he fasted, who knows? All it says is that he pleaded because she was barren. And so what comes to me is that the promise, it comes through waiting
Mhm.
and through prayer.
Yes. Very
And,
good.
and not only that, when a husband prays for his wife, I think there's a special, how must I put it? There is a special effectiveness to that prayer, because the husband is responsible for his wife.
Yes.
And so rather than blaming the wife as being barren, oh, you can't, no, he goes to Yahweh. He goes to Elohim. He says, you have to make this thing happen because it is your covenant. I love that. That attitude.
Yes.
So, I have a nice soft spot here for Yitzhak in that
Yeah.
sense. Praise
Yeah.
the
Yes. And indeed, you mentioned something that is very important. A husband's prayer for his wife is very, very powerful. It's more powerful than most moderners are aware of. And it becomes, and it is powerful when they are in line, in sync, and both are submitted to the same order. Rebecca actually came to Yitzhak and requested it, showing that she needed him to do so. She could have taken it upon herself, let me fast and pray. Let me try and get this done herself, but no, she actually went. So that is something that we will see, and what we need to do as individuals as we're going through this history. Men look at the way the men acted, and women look at the way the women acted. And we have examples of good actions and bad actions. And we take the good actions and apply it to ourselves because that is what Yah is pleased with. So it helps us to develop the same cultural traditions and way of life that was set before us. And Zakan, you talked about passing the baton. It's very important for us to recognize the genealogy, especially since we hear it used so much in the Brit Hadash that a lot of people say is cut off from the Tanakh, the Old Testament, Brit Hadash being the renewed covenant. Adon Yahusha answered his naysayers one time by when he told them that Yahweh is Elohim of the living, Elohim of Abram. And what he's saying is that the same Elohim that was with Abram in his 100 plus years is the same Elohim that was with Yitzhak after Abram died. So he is still, even though he was Abram's Elohim when he was alive, he now is Yitzhak's Elohim until he dies. And the same Elohim undying is Elohim for Yaakov, and so on and so forth, straight up till today, so that we see that the same Elohim who was with Abram is the same Elohim who is with us today. And that's something very important to understand. It might seem very simple, but there are some people who believe that the Elohim of the Tanakh is a different Elohim in the Brit Hadash, saying that the Elohim in the Tanakh or in the Old Covenant is harsh and cold and is unforgiving. So that's a different character that we show fully with all of the love, and they have to mention grace, full in the Brit Hadash in the renewed covenant. But he's the same person, has not changed. He said he doesn't change, he will not change. So as everything that he did for the ancestors, he's still the same Elohim and will do it for us if we act like the ancestors. This is faith building. It's faith building because recognizing Yah's consistency and seeing the great and marvelous and wondrous things that he has done in the past, to know that he has not changed and his power is still the same. He's still able to do it for us today, regardless of our situation, regardless of what we're going through. He sees us in the same light as he saw those whom he draw near to him in the past. So our Elohim is indeed the Elohim of the living. He will collect the dead at the time, but he is for us now. Yes, Sakan.
Okay, I think there's one more thing I see.
Mhm.
You took us to Romans chapter
Yes.
9 and verse 13,
Right.
but you saw 2 verses above that what Shaul said about Elohim's choice. In verse 11, he said that the choice was made before they were born even before they did any good or evil. I thought that was critical, and I'll tell you why. Remember the other day, we saw how he chose Moshe,
Yes.
and we also note just recently how he chose Yitzhak, even though Abraham had other sons. The promise was made between Abraham and Sarah, not Abraham and Hagar, not Abraham and Keturah. So he made that choice even before any of those 8 sons were born. And look again now, he's making the choice of Yaakov before the 2 sons were born. What does that tell us?
Knows
That
everything.
Elohim's choice, where he places us, has nothing to do with our performance. He did not wait for Yaakov and Esau to grow up and behave in certain ways, and then he says, okay, this is the one I choose. It had nothing to do with their performance. Everything to do with him making his choice. And his word says he knows each one of us even before we were conceived in our mother's womb. And he has chosen a path for us. Problem is, we have difficulty finding that path because we take too long to surrender our will. We take too long to surrender our obedience. We take too long, and sometimes Kohen and others on the platform, I am 72 years old, and sometimes in my mind, I think of the many wasted years I did not know the plan or the purpose. You know, you follow me.
Yes, I do.
It's a thought that one cannot get away from. And so the focus for me now is on, and this is just a little testimony, rather than pining about the past, it's about redeeming the time.
Yes.
And doing what his purpose is. Because he chose me for a reason. That's why I'm here still.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do agree with selection even before, but it still goes back to Yahweh knowing everything, his omniscience. Him identifying even before, because we can even go back even further than when we were born. We can go back to creation. If he knows the beginning before the end, everything is played out. And we do not want to negate the fact that we do have choice. Because if we didn't have choice, then we would not need Adon Yahusha, because he is our choice. And that has brought us into the Yahweh. Now, in making that choice, we were encouraged by the Ruach HaKodesh to make that choice. So Yahweh does, Yahweh knows everything. He does allow us, and he encourages. And in some things, like Pharaoh, the things that he did to Pharaoh, Pharaoh should have repented and turned if he had a heart to do so. But the more he did to Pharaoh, instead of turning, Pharaoh got harder. So in that, Yahweh didn't harden his heart. His reactions to Yahweh was his choice to harden his heart. And Esau played a big part in what he did. His choice was to despise, but Yahweh knew it was going to happen. So Yaakov was always his choice even before. But Yahweh does choose his people. And sometimes, Elder and everybody in the platform, it happens when he wants it to happen. It happens in his time. Moshe tried to do it at age 40 and it didn't work. He committed murder, had to flee. It wasn't until he was 80, which was the appointed time, So Yahweh deals with each and every one of us at the time that we should to step in. And been doing a lot of talking, and I see both Vic and Short Hepzibah with their hands up at this time. So please go right ahead. Vic first, who had the hand up, and first, and then Short Hepzibah, please.
Okay, you just kind of shut down what I was about to say. Seeing that predestiny forms such a huge part of our lives. I was just going to say it looks like we have no choice, but then you just spoke about choice a couple of minutes ago, because everyone's existence seems to be predestined, but does Yah base that predestiny on the character, saying, okay, this is what he would do anyway, because he knows the beginning from the end. So this is the part I'll give him in the play,
Yes. It's Yahweh knew that Adam would sin, even before he created Adam.
He had to know.
Yeah, because he had a plan of salvation that went back to before creation. So Yahweh knows, but he still allows us to go through the process, allow us to make the choice. And sometimes we make the wrong choices and we are allowed to come back. Sometimes we make the wrong choices and there is no coming back. And that's the situation there.
But are we really making wrong choices, though, seeing that he knows even before we're born, like how this is going to play out, it really has you going, because sometimes you think on your own life and you see how close you came to being a totally different person in a totally different area of life. And then because you did that one little thing, it just turned everything around and you're like, how did this happen? And I think Yah destines your existence from beginning to end.
Yeah, I would like to look at destiny, predestination, choices as all having been a natural occurrence because of sin introduction, and Yahweh knowing the characters and who he would choose, and so on and so forth. Not to the point where it's controlled. It's just that he has knowledge of what will be, and he utilizes based on his knowledge, which is far beyond us. He utilizes that for that purpose to strengthen us in the work that he wants to place upon us to do. And this is what believe it or not, this is what most theologians discuss in their seminaries: the predestination and the choices and the destiny and so on and so forth. But Yahweh, who knows everything, does not interfere unless we ask him to interfere, or he's doing his part as the overseer and judge.
It's really not an easy thing to figure out, but I guess we can't figure out Yah, because Yah is
No, we cannot.
So much greater than we are, you know.
It's futile to do so.
Yes, to even try.
Right. Short Hepzibah.
Okay, shalom.
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 Okay, shalom, Imafek. I think, listening to you, Imafek, Dr. Kadi, to be honest with you, y'all kind of answered the questions or stuff I was going to ask too. But thinking, when we think about this study tonight, on top of what we've studied before, I think about, as you laid out what the brothers did, the choices they both had, and then you brought up too Moshe, and I think about Moshe's story from the time his mother put him in the basket, send him down the river. He was his destiny. Yahweh chose him from then. And the thing is, when Psalm says, he knew us from our mother's womb, Yahweh, I think I told one of my kids, Yahweh doesn't move. Because of sin, we move away from him. Yahweh is still right there. He still exists, self all powerful, awesome. And when we say return to the Torah, we return to Yahweh's will for our lives. And the thing is, like the brothers, they made choices. The mother might have known, okay, yeah, the second son was going to inherit the pearl, the birthright, and everything else like that. And what happened, just like with Abraham and Sarah, they interfered or tried to help along. The mummy was trying to work things out. He was doing things. It says we, in our own mindset, try to work things out. But it shows us that Yahweh's plan will go on. It just can take a longer route, but his plan will still happen. It's like no matter when we put our hands in it and we try to work it out, we try to fix it. And when Dr. Kadi said, submit to Yahweh, be obedient, that's the thing is, I think when we did the Torah study on Abraham, on these things, I always was like, Yahweh gave the plan to Abraham, and he told him, he made a covenant with Abraham. And then Abraham, even after he told him and he made the covenant with him, Abraham still let fear, he afraid of the kings, and what happened? He go and he lie and he this. It's like it shows us what we do in our humanity and our own human reasoning. Yahweh's thoughts are not like our thoughts. We let the outside, the world filter in, and it shapes and fear and these other things come, and insecurity, jealousy, and envy. You envy in something that's not. All these human traits that we have, we could actually look at ourselves and see some of it in our own lives. But what I love is that it gives us so much hope, because we know where Abraham started is not where he finished. Same thing with Moshe. And we see that, as we return to Yahweh and we start to give everything over to him, that the plan that he had from the beginning, before we knew ourselves, it will be fulfilled. That's my thoughts.
Okay. Okay, Kohen AriYah.
Soda. I appreciate that point, Sharit Hepzibah. And there were a lot of little nuggets in there as food for thought, which I very much appreciate. But I want to go back to the question of choice, and just to share a thought, because there are so many people who believe that this thing called predestination turns us into robots. But that is not Yahweh's or Elohim's intention for us. In fact, from the time he made the first couple, in fact, from the time he made the first man, even before Eve was created, man had a choice to obey or not to obey. And the thought came to my mind a while ago, how many people have you heard say The devil made me do it. You know that expression. We know that expression since I was small. One time, my son, when he was about 5 years old, you've seen a picture of the house, Kohen. I think I would have sent a picture to Charlotte Epstein. It's a two-story house. He was about 5, climbed over the balcony on top and jumped to the ground. His only injury was he hurt his little finger, but it wasn't even a serious injury. It wasn't broken or anything like that. And when my wife asked him why he did it, you know what his response was at 5? Devil made me do it. I don't know if he had ever heard that expression before, but that was his response at the age of 5.
Wow.
He knew the difference between right and wrong. He felt that that was something wrong, and it only had to be because the devil made him do it. And people go through their whole lives sometimes with that same excuse for the choices they make. The devil does not make anybody do anything. He tempts. Maybe he deceives.
Yes.
He connives. He beguiles. But we make
Choose.
choices.
Yes.
We choose. So even though it is Yah's will for all of us to be in relationship with him, some are lost, not because he predestined them to be lost, but because of the choices they made. And those who are saved because of the choices they made.
Yes.
8 persons chose to go into the ark. The others refused. They snubbed at the project. They laughed at it to their detriment. And we can look throughout history and we see it is our choices that determine our destiny.
That is correct. It is our choices. Our choices, Yahweh points us in the direction is in our choice. It is up to us to choose the direction we go in. So do appreciate that. And I appreciate that contribution. I'm sure it helps about really encouraging. One of the things that we have to recognize in choices that we do make, that Yahweh will punish the devil for the devil's work, but he will punish us for ours. That's what he did from the garden at the first judgment scene. He judged the serpent for what the serpent did. He judged Eve for what Eve did. He judged Adam for what Adam did. Each one carried their own responsibility that they was trying to duck. And that is the thing. If we take responsibility for our choices and our actions, it is easier to resolve than if we try to ignore it and blame somebody else. Taking responsibility is a sign of spiritual maturity. So I do appreciate all of the contributions. And as mentioned earlier, we want to have a short meeting after our study. So what I'll do is I'll